Right. Welcome. This is the third video in the series about economic understanding with Mr. Helmo Preus, macroeconomist of South Africa. And we have spoken in the first one about his background and a little bit about economics itself. The second one we have talked about global trends. And this third video will focus on the next superpowers and their influence on the economy of the world. And the first one that comes to mind is China. And we know also that China have some problems in terms of overinvestment, negative population growth rate, Xi Jinping that also want to hold onto power for as long as possible, despite a generation that is, I think, more open, and not just more open, but demanding, also more free enterprise, freedom of speech. To what extent will the challenges that I've mentioned, do you think have an impact on the economy of China beyond other challenges that we can talk about later, Mr. Preus?
Well, I think the worst aspect is, in terms of the control, is that it stifles entrepreneurial spirits. So Jack Ma, for instance, was going to do something with his financial services. He was, in a way, shut down, and he's been out of the limelight since then. And other entrepreneurs who would want to emulate him will decide they'd rather be outside mainland China rather than inside mainland China. So China will still grow, but it's taking away that entrepreneurial spirit will take off at least 2 percentage points of growth.
Thank you. A man like Elon Musk, where does he fit into the what shall we call it, the opportunities in China itself?
Well, Tesla is very big in terms of EV in China itself, and he also is very there in terms of the gigafactories, batteries. But his focus now is moving away from Tesla to AI. He is a serial entrepreneur. He's got many things to worry about. SpaceX as well. The Hyperloop at the moment seems to be stillborn, but he's also looking at embedding artificial intelligence in human brains. So he has many things going on at the same time. So China for him is not a prime focus.
Okay. The challenge that we've mentioned, any other challenges of China that you think it's important that will have a major influence on China the next decade?
Well, what's happening is that Western powers, whether Europe or America, are moving back from their engagement with China. So Apple, for instance, is moving some of its production into India. Germany, in terms of its EV and car production, is also pulling back. So that will constrain growth going forward. If you look at what happened in the first 4 months of this year, foreign direct investment is down substantially compared to a year ago, and that's going to continue.
The comparing the growth rate since Mao Zedong, it was phenomenal. The growth rate of China after Mao Zedong, not directly, but later on, and then it stabilized down a little bit, as all the other countries as well. How do you see the next 10 years?
The next 10 years, trend growth will be around about 5% as opposed to 8% of the previous 5 years, and the double-digit growth from the period sort of 1978 through to 2020. So it will, but that's what you expect as the economy matures. You got to remember that it is the second largest economy in the world, and 4% now is equivalent to 12% 20 years ago in terms of how much extra output it produces.
That brings us to the country with the biggest population, India, its neighbor, and they're not always such good relationship between the two of them. How do you see the India's economy in the next few years, also given Moody, that have now not received the majority?
And I think not receiving as big a majority as he wanted, that will constrain and provide some checks and balances in terms of the Indian economy. But in terms of growth rates, next 3 to 5 years, they'll be running at 8%. They will be the largest major economy in terms of growth rates going forward. So they're looking good, and they still have tremendous expansion possibilities.
The India's GDP, total GDP, compared to China and America, do you have any ballpark?
They're still relative. I think it's India's probably now the fifth largest economy. So the US will be first, China second, Japan third, Germany fourth, and then India. So it's up there, whereas 10 years ago it would have been outside the top 10.
Okay. And it's as the biggest democracy, do you think it will have a specific influence in terms of democracy around the world, or not really? Because they're not actually, they don't actually have aggressive foreign influence, India, compared to USA or China.
Yeah, the Indians mind their own way, and the focus very much for India, in a way similar to Germany and the UK, is on commerce rather than foreign influence. But they are certainly moving closer to the US rather than China going forward.
Yeah. Okay. In terms of BRICS and the alliance between India and China, both together as the countries with the biggest population by far, to what extent will they be able to align their differences in playing a big role in terms of BRICS, in forming some or other economic cooperation and alliances? Because India, as you said, is closer to the United States, but on the other hand, it's part of BRICS. So it is it's quite a different alliance.
In India, in a way, wants to be non-aligned and supports weakening the hold of the superpowers, or the old superpowers, on security. So India, for instance, does not have a permanent seat on the Security Council.
Mm-hmm.
So that's that's more than 50 years old in terms of the United Nations.
Mm-hmm.
They certainly are pushing for a revamp of the United Nations and the Security Council and things like that. There will be strong resistance from China and Russia to that, because once they allow India in, then why not Indonesia? Why not Nigeria? And why not Brazil? So, and the more people you allow in and have a permanent place on the Security Council with a veto power, then United Nations just becomes very more unwieldy.
Yeah. Thank you. In terms of what are the biggest challenges of India economically and
Well, and India still has a very large poor population, so their challenges is the same as in terms of South Africa, is unemployment, poverty, and inequality, because they've got a caste system that's been there for centuries, and the vestiges of that still remains there today. And on top of that, they now have the fight between the Hindus and the Muslims in India itself, never mind between India and Pakistan.
Yeah. Turkey. I think Turkey is going to play a very strategic role, and they have already in the between Europe and Asia, or in that between those continents where he's situated. Do you think Turkey will at one point be part of the European Union, and when do you foresee it in this coming decade, or not at all?
Turkey's been applying for European Union membership for over 20 years, so it's not something new. And one of the major problems is because it is Muslim, and there is a push against Muslim immigration in the rest of the European Union, which will make it difficult for Turkey to become a member of the European Union. It's more likely that Turkey becomes part of BRICS Plus rather than the European Union. But in 20 or 30 years, I can quite easily see Turkey actually becoming a member of the European Union. You've got to remember that Turkey is part of NATO already, and has been for almost since its founding.
Yeah. If we look at Mexico, and Mexico and America have always a very strange relationship. I mean, I think in the 1800s, Mexico lost the war. What is it, 1850?
1850s under General Santa Anna.
Yeah.
And lost half its territory. So California, Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, those were all Mexican colonies, or part of Mexico. But remember, in those days, in a way, Mexico was also part of the Spanish Empire. So it goes back a long time. One of the Mexican presidents said, pity poor Mexico. It says, so close to the United States and so far away from God. So that's the Mexican relationship with the US. It's its neighbor.
Yeah, and they depend on each other to some extent with migrant workers. To what extent is the American economy dependent on the Mexicans, and with Trump becoming a increasing probability that he will win the next election, and his antagonism against the Mexicans with the closing of the border, to what extent would you think that will aggravate the Mexicans in any way, and what will be their response?
And when it comes to looking at the world, you need to order your priorities. And whether it's Biden or Trump who become the next president, both of them will put China at the top, and then Russia, and then Mexico. So in terms of priorities, Mexico will be, because of its strategic alignment with the US, will always have a friendly relationship with the US. Last year, for the first time in more than 2 decades, Mexico was the US's largest trading partner. It superseded China, who had been briefs, and that is likely to continue going forward. So,
it was a growing population.
there are a lot of American companies that have plants in Mexico because labor is cheaper there.
Yeah. Saudi Arabia have been invited to be part of BRICS. What do you think is the probability that they will become part of BRICS, and what role will they play if they?
And I think Saudi Arabia will take a wait-and-see attitude. So they've sort of gone lukewarm on becoming part of BRICS compared to what was happening in South Africa at the BRICS summit.
Yeah.
And there is succession as well. So the Crown Prince delayed his trip to Japan because his father was sick. So his father seems to have recovered, but his priority is to ensure his succession, number one. And then with what's happening in the Middle East, he wants to play a bigger role there. And I personally think that the October 7 attack by Hamas was specifically aimed at stopping a Saudi Arabia-Israeli peace deal. So that's going to occupy his mind more than becoming part of BRICS or in anything else.
Yeah, well, you could be correct. If we look at ESGs, it was very, I think it peaked into 2022, the popularity of that environmental, sustainability, social and governance.
Yeah.
And in 23, there was a movement away. I've seen this year also, I think BlackRock have been as the biggest investment company, have moved away from it. Do you think it will deteriorate or have any further influence or stabilize and increase? What do you think is the...
And I think it will come back with especially climate change being as part of the corporate accountability. So that ESG will definitely come back, especially on the environmental part. And, next, coming shortly, the EU is going to impose carbon taxes on imports into the EU. So it will remain top of mind for most corporate executives.
Yeah, okay. The European Union elections this year, the right wing overall are gaining some field, it seems.
Yes.
Do you think it will make a substantial difference in the future decisions of the European Union in the next couple of years, or minor shifts?
I think minor shifts. I mean, we saw at the last elections there was a shift to the right already, and they are the sort of biggest bloc in the European Parliament, and very little outcome because the member states still have the major role in deciding national policy rather than the EU.
The any other countries that I haven't mentioned that you think will have a major influence on the world economics?
One that seems to be ignored by a lot of people is Indonesia. Indonesia has a growing population. It is the largest coal exporter in the world, and I think it will play an increasing role. The Indonesians themselves do not throw their weight around, but I think you neglect Indonesia at your own peril. It is a growing economy, and it will continue to grow.
Japan with its enormous debt, but still, to some extent, technological-wise, plays a big role in the world economy. I mean, I think you mentioned it's what number 3 or 3 in the world economy in terms of GDP. To what extent do you think the relationship with China will have a positive or a negative influence on their economy, or are there other challenges that's more that we are normally not considered as important?
Japan has been pulling back from its engagement with China over the islands. That's been ongoing now for the last 10 years. So Japanese investment into China has stagnated since then. And the Japanese are looking more, as they did in the 1970s and 1980s, to look for resources. So they are moving into resources around the world to secure them. And they, in terms of trading, they are still a major influence in the world.
Last question, in terms of Africa, except for China, which other countries will have a serious intention to gain benefit from the resources in Africa?
Well, Russia, especially in the Sahel, is making a big impact there. The Soviet or the Russian foreign minister is in Conakry as we speak, and the problem that the media have here is they don't really look beyond our borders. So what happens in West Africa or East Africa or North Africa hardly gets any mention, but the Russians are very active in a lot of African countries. And the other one major player in this space is France. France has still got a major focus in terms of Africa.
With some negative publicity recently.
But it's still a major, it isn't engaged much more so than Germany or India or America. So in terms of active involvement in politics, etc., France is playing a major role.
Given the South African election, I mean, there are more than rumors about Putin's support, financial support for EFF in the MK, which is not necessarily only political. Do you think it has got a serious economic intention in focusing on the resources, or is it not that deep?
It's not that deep in terms of resources. The problem that Russian companies face in South Africa and to a certain extent in the rest of Africa is Western sanctions against Russian companies. So one of the companies that is involved in South Africa, its owner has been sanctioned by the US. So that constrains Russian direct investment in India. You also have the Russian banks involved in the tuna deal in Mozambique. So their reputation is not that good.
Okay, this concludes then this video about the economic superpowers and those associated with them, or issues related to them. So thank you very much, Mr. Preus.
Thank you.
Then the next video we will focus on governance issues.